Good evening, you're watching Estuary TV News. Coming up, shipbuilding on the Humber. We take a look at an industry ready for a relaunch. And heavenly messages, high-speed broadband from a Lincolnshire church. And I'll be talking to Kevin Smith about the wrecks of Grimsby trawlers sunk by enemy action during the First World War. Welcome to Estuary TV News. I'm Hugh Richards. First of all, it's over to Emma Lingard for the news headlines.
Hello. The transformation of Hull in readiness for 2017 has begun with the surveying of building works in Queen Victoria Square. It will take 10 weeks as part of the transformation for Hull's year as City of Culture, with the aim of improving the city's infrastructure and turning it into a world-class visitor destination. Martin Mancy, portfolio holder for Energy City, outlined what businesses and visitors can expect from these works.
It's important for investors to see a quality location that's attractive from a business perspective, but also from the ordinary common visitor perspective. We need to change the image of this city, not just locally but nationally and internationally, and this is part of that process.
And plans include the installation of new public art, trees, lighting, paving and street furniture. Fines of £100 will now be given out to anyone caught drinking alcohol with one of the 7 controlled drinking zones in North East Lincolnshire. The fine was set by the council to stop people drinking alcohol in public. The West Marsh, East Marsh, Heneage, Sydney Sussex, Croft Baker and South Wards are the enforceable zones. The number of primary school children allocated their first choice schools in Hull has increased. 92% of children have been allocated their first preference school compared to 89% last year. 30% of applications were made online this year, and in the East Riding over 95% have received their first choice. There are concerns the shell of the Grade 2 listed church, which was burnt on Wednesday, could collapse. The Methodist Church on Lambert Street in Hull caught fire in the early hours and saw over 30 fire officers tackle the blaze. An investigation is underway as to what caused the fire. It was believed the property had recently been sold for development.
Before the building was in good shape, it was in good order, but it was boarded up, and I believe it was earmarked for development.
And finally, a total of 554 bowel cancers have been detected since a regional screening programme was introduced. Since it began in 2007, the Humber and Yorkshire Coast programme has seen over 500,000 people. Nurses have been in St Stephen's Shopping Centre to encourage people to talk about the disease. That's it for now. Goodbye.
Ship and boat building are often associated with the industrial decline of the 1980s on the Clyde or the Tyne. But in 2015, shipbuilding could be seeing a resurgence on the Humber. Dave Nunn went to have a look at a new ship built with new methods and materials.
Shipbuilding is a British industry that suffered from a huge decline in the 1980s. But now a new way to build ships, using new materials and techniques, is starting what is claimed to be a shipbuilding revolution on the Humber.
It is. The design of the landing craft is very different simply because of the material that's used with the high-density polyethylene. High-density polyethylene is a relatively new material for boat building. The beauty of the high-density polyethylene is that it's corrosion-free, so you have zero corrosion. You don't need to paint it at all during its lifetime. Marine growth doesn't stick to it. You never need to worry about anodes and zinc anodes like you usually do on a standard vessel. And the beauty of that is the material manufacturer then warranties the material for 50 years. So you could have relatively 50 years of trouble-free operation from the vessel. So it's a huge cost saving for operators in the long term.
Seahorse Marine makes these new ships and exports them to Africa. This specific vessel will be used as a medical craft in Ghana, and the new material and techniques used to make the ship make it ideal for use in Ghana.
Absolutely. For Ghana, it's ideal. We've already delivered 3 vessels to Ghana, 3 passenger ferries, and this hospital vessel is the next in a series of boats that we're hoping to deliver. The beauty of this for Ghana is the zero maintenance that's required and the durability of the product, meaning that this boat will last many years and go on to provide lots of services to local villages and community where currently there's no access to medical care.
By combining traditional and new shipbuilding techniques, Tony believes that the Humber can lead in a rejuvenation of the shipbuilding industry in Britain.
I mean, what we believe in the next generation of boat building, and that's what we're trying to do with this product, with the plastic, is we believe that that's the future in boat building. So what we're doing now is we're actively employing apprentices and training them in the traditional boat building techniques, but also in the new techniques that we use to build these vessels, so that the local community here in Hull has a future in boat building. I started my career here in Hull, just at Hepworth Shipyard down in Paul, and served an apprenticeship there, and have now gone on and brought boat building back to the city ourselves. So yeah, it's very important to us.
You're watching Estuary TV News. A little later, we'll be taking a look at another beautiful dog of the week, and Dan Kemp will bring you all the sports news. We've just seen something of the future of shipping on the Humber, but the estuary's ports have a long history of fishing. During the First World War, Grimsby's trawlers sailed the oceans to feed a besieged nation, and so they were fair game for German U-boats. Now there are plans to research and dive on some of those wrecked trawlers. Kevin Smith joins me. Kevin, thank you very much for coming in.
Hello.
First of all, diving on wrecked trawlers sounds a bit dangerous.
It can be if you don't know what you're doing, but we're all fully trained members of BSAC, British Sub-Aqua Club, and we're all qualified to dive down to 50 metres.
And so if you've got that British Sub-Aqua Club regulations and all that, then
and the training,
you're all competent and you all feel safe.
Everybody's trained.
Why are you doing it? Why are you diving on trawlers?
It's the First World War centenary. We wanted to tell the people that they weren't just out there fishing, they were supplying the nation with food, and a lot of these people went out and never came back, and they died just fishing.
And what was the form? The trawlers would go out across the whole of the North Atlantic, wouldn't they?
Yes.
And up into the Arctic as well?
Yes, all over.
And so they were very vulnerable to enemy
That's right,
attack.
yes. Anywhere at all that the German submarines were, or the minefields, they laid mines on a regular basis, so the trawlers didn't know whether there was mines there. And in the early days, they didn't anchor the mines. They just let them drift. So they could have dropped them in the sea up in Scotland, and 3 days later they're off the Humber. So they just drift around, and you could just run into one at any time.
Well, I know there's one particular trawler captain who was particularly heroic.
Yes, the trawler captain of the Rabono, before it was sank, they spotted a mine, and he lowered his small rowing boat. He went over to the mine, threw a net around it, towed it back to his boat, and then brought it all the way back to Grimsby so that the Admiralty and the Navy could look at the mine to find out how it worked.
Now that is rather
That is, to me, is an unbelievable feat of heroism. It's bordering on stupidity, to be honest.
Well, you'd want a very, very long line on that net round the mine, wouldn't you?
And he was given £50 as his reward.
Well, 50 quid in 1915.
Be a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Yeah. The trawlers were feeding the nation.
Yes.
It was a perfectly legitimate war strategy by the Germans to try to starve the island out. And so I suppose sinking trawlers was legitimate warfare.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes, it was. They would come up amongst the fleet and fire a warning shot, and then tell them to get off, and then they'd go on board and take any food or anything they wanted, any books or personal documents, and then put a bomb on it and sink it.
And so the trawler men were expected to row back to...
Well, that was it. They were just left in the middle of the sea with no provisions, nothing.
Right.
In a small boat.
And did they... I mean, what were their chances then of coming back to land?
I would think a lot of them never made it. Some of them will have done because there have been other passing ships coming home, but the chances are in the middle of January or December time in the minus weather, it would have been, I would have thought many of them would have perished before they got home.
Well, at least they had a chance, and that was the Germans, certainly that first phase of naval warfare where there was a certain gentlemanly honour among combatants.
Yes, that's right.
But then Winston Churchill became First Lord of the Admiralty.
Yes, and he decided that it was a good idea to possibly try and stop these submarines sinking boats. So his idea was he put out trawlers which were ordinary trawlers, but he put a gun on them and hid it. And when the submarine came up, he would then, the Royal Navy personnel on board the trawler would fire at the submarine, and I think they sunk one or two. And then the German submarines decided, well, if that's the name of the game, then we would just sink them without any warning. So they just sunk them. And that gunfire usually. They didn't waste a torpedo on them because they weren't worth it.
Right, torpedoes were only for the big
for big ships, yeah, because a small fishing boat, they'd come up and just shoot at it with their deck gun, and that would be enough. And that ammunition would be big enough to hold a trawler severely enough that she'd sink? Yeah. There's one that went in, there's a report of one off Lowestoft, which was, I can't remember the captain's name, but he was on an armed trawler and he was with his two sons, and the submarine, they engaged the submarine. One of the submarine shells came through the wheelhouse, took the captain's both legs off. He managed to still carry on steering the boat at the submarine while the man on the deck was firing the gun, until they just blew the thing to pieces and it sank and they all died. It was never a comfortable life being a trawlerman in those days. Well, at no time was it a comfortable life being a trawlerman, but in those conditions, particularly horrible. You have some experience of going to sea? Yes, my father was a trawlerman from the age of 14. I went on a pleasure cruise in the 60s. They called it a pleasure cruise. I went up to Iceland once and vowed I would never go again. It was that bad? It frightened me to death. Okay. It was, and that was in the summer. But what it was like in the winter, I don't know. But you're happy going out on a diving boat? Yeah, we go out diving. We stay out overnight. Sometimes we'll stay out 2 or 3 nights, but usually we go out and come back on the same day. Kevin, thank you very much. Don't go away. We'll talk about more specifically about this project and diving on these wrecks and where they are in a moment. But for now, thank you very much. Thank you. A fast and stable internet connection is the key to the digital economy, with the government, whatever that might be, pushing to get more people connected with high-speed broadband. Residents in Ryebe in Lincolnshire took their own steps by getting broadband installed in their local church, and Dave Nunn went to see if the connection was up to speed.
A couple of months ago we brought you the story of Wi-Fi being installed on Ryebe Church in an effort to improve the village's connection speeds. So, a couple of months later, how are people finding the new connection?
Yeah, we use it at work, the other side of the village. The only problem we have is we're not line of sight with the top of the church. We're about a mile away. So it will mean us putting a satellite dish up to try and get the signal. But anyone that's got line of sight with the top of the church can get an internet connection that's very much quicker than the broadband we're receiving, because we've got very low speed in the rural area.
Well, the church is open all day Wednesday, every Wednesday, so I tend to come down in the afternoons and I'll sit here and just do some stuff here, which is better because I get a better connection here than I do at home. I can get onto my bank accounts here and I can change things and set up direct debits, eBay.
In a non-scientific test, the Wi-Fi is indeed fast at around 5 megabits per second. But does this connection put internet providers to shame?
Well, my understanding of it is that it's very difficult to get cable into every single home in the country. Obviously, they're going to concentrate on the major areas, conurbation areas, where the most people are. So I think that an aerial Wi-Fi system for outlying rural areas is very much more sensible, but it doesn't seem to sort of figure in the master scheme. But we're fortunate that West Lindsey have supported this initiative and that we have got that facility.
Paul says that through support from the local diocese, schemes like this could be enacted in rural communities nationwide.
As far as I understand, this is the first one in West Lindsey to actually embrace this, putting an aerial on the roof. And I think they're a tall building within the community, and they're usually within the centre of a small rural community. So I think that it does work quite well, yeah. And certainly we had a lot of help from the diocese, and they had from the DAC, they had no issues with it at all, and they helped us get the facility.
With the Wi-Fi here proving a success so far, it provides a template for similar schemes in the future.
Kevin Smith is still here to talk about Grimsby's trawlers sunk during the First World War and diving on those wrecks.
Yes.
What prompted the idea of doing it now? I know it's the anniversary of the First World War, but is it now that the technology is there, the funds are there, the will is there?
Well, the technology's been there for a while for us to dive them in the North Sea, because the North Sea is a very shallow sea. Most of the sea that we dive in around the coast of Britain is maximum 35 metres. So nearly all of the trawlers that we'll be diving on are in 25 metres.
So you're just doing the North Sea wrecks, you're not going...
No, we're not doing any further than the North Sea. So all of the wrecks that we do are well within our range, so that's not a problem. And we've got a Heritage Lottery Fund grant to, they're paying us to go out there and research them and dive them and train people up to go and look, because most people never see them.
And how many wrecks are you intending to visit?
We're doing 8 at the moment. That's our first phase, and we're hoping that we'll get all these 8 done. We're doing a film of each of the trawlers, so we're doing for 4 years, and then we are, on the last year, we are doing a 1-hour film of all of the trawlers and where they were built, how fished them, where they went, and how they ended up their life. And
the project is starting this summer?
Yes. And
going on for, what, 4 years?
Yes, until 11th of the 11th, 2018.
Okay, all right.
Ending with the end of the First World War.
A significant anniversary, of course. When you get down there, what do you find sitting on the seabed?
Usually on the North Sea it's very flat and gravel, but if the wreck's there, then there'll be the remains of what was left. After 100 years they were iron ships, most of them, steam trawlers, so there will possibly only be a boiler, an engine, and a lot of brass fittings off the steam pipes and boilers. Hopefully there might be some personal effects, because the crew abandoned the ship and had to leave everything that they belongings.
And nothing of the hull left, nothing recognisable as a ship?
There might be a few plates, depending on how it survived or where it was buried and it's been uncovered, because the sands move, and if they get covered over and then they uncover, then some of them survive. Some of them are in pretty good order, but the majority of them are not.
What would be, I mean, you talk about a few personal effects. What's the holy grail, as it were? What's the...
Well, the holy grail is the bell. The ship's bell, they usually always had one. Some of them had 2. They always had one on the bridge, and sometimes they had one on the bow, so that the duty watch person would stand at the bow in fog and ring the bell, because no such thing as fog horns instead of bell. So that would be nice, because that would definitely identify the ship.
As we said, after Churchill became First Lord of the Admiralty and some of these trawlers were armed, they were sunk without warning.
Yes.
And no chance to abandon ships. So the chances are you might be finding some human remains. Does that make it a war grave, as it were?
Yes, any human remains found, then we will stop immediately. We won't disturb any of the human remains. But my knowledge of diving hundreds of wrecks in the North Sea, I've never seen any.
Well, 100 years is a long time for organic matter to...
The majority of them will have just disappeared. I mean, we don't know whether they were on them. Some of them were on them when they sank, but a lot of them will have jumped off and just drowned at sea and wherever.
There's not going to be an awful lot of evidence on the wrecks themselves in terms of documents. The ship's logs are hardly going to survive.
None of those.
But you do have various other sources of research.
Yes. The people that built the boats, Cochrane's built a lot of them from Selby. We've got some of their plans for the boats, and they always put an engine plate on their engines saying who made it, where it was made, the dates and things like that. So if we can find an engine plate, that will identify the ship.
And you've also got sources from the Admiralty?
Yes, Admiralty sources from divers in the past that have been on them, but haven't identified them, gives us an idea of what they are like. Two of the ships that was involved in mine clearing, the Alberta and Orcades, they were blown up together, and the first one, the Alberta, lost its stern, and a diver in 1990 dived it and said it was a small steam trawler with no stern.
You'd also have some assistance, presumably from German records, the German Admiralty.
Yes, we've got the German U-boat logs, which are on the way from Germany. Hopefully they will identify where they laid mines, and they kept very meticulous logs of what ships they sank. They named them and gave us the positions where they sank them.
Where will all this research, information, insight be available? Is there going to be an exhibition,
yes,
a book?
Yes, we've got the Fishing Heritage Centre for the next 4 years. We are in there this year in the foyer, and then from 16-17 we are in the cafe area where there will be a film being displayed and photographs, and then upstairs in 1918 the full.
Kevin, I look forward. That sounds absolutely fascinating. Good luck with the project.
Great, thank you.
And now here's the sport with Dan Kemp.
FA Trophy winners North Ferriby United have been put up for sale. The villagers were taken over by the daughter and son-in-law of Hull City chairman Assem Alam 2 years ago. Steve and Eman Forster have now decided to step aside following the most successful period in the club's history, which culminated in their Wembley success over Wrexham at the end of last month. Hull City striker Nikita Jelavic has been cleared to resume on-field training following an operation. The Croatian striker aggravated a long-standing knee injury against Leicester City last month, but staff will now keep a close eye on his rehabilitation as the Tigers aim to have him back before the end of the current campaign. Meanwhile, Uruguayan midfielder Gaston Ramirez is set to return to training following a hamstring injury. City are just 2 points clear of 18th place QPR, but aren't in action this weekend due to Liverpool's FA Cup semi-final. A Grimsby snooker player has been drawn against a former world #1 in the first round of the World Championships. Stuart Carrington will play Judd Trump in the competition starting on Saturday. Carrington overcame former world champion Peter Ebden and Chinese player Li Hang to make it to the Sports Showpiece event, which starts on Saturday. And finally, Rugby Union and Hull Ionians looking to go 9 games unbeaten as they host Huddersfield on Saturday. It's the final game of the season at Brantingham Park for Eyes, and they're 3 points clear of second place Ampthill District. Elsewhere, Hull UFC continue their fight against relegation with a must-win game at Birmingham. Meanwhile, in Midlands 3, Scunthorpe are at Burton. Don't hesitate to get in touch if you've got any sports stories you want to share with us. You can call 01472 31 553, email sport@estuary.tv. Bye for now.
Let's just have another quick look at another resident of Sangreet Kennels hoping for a new home. Here's our dog of the week.
Bo is a Akita Cross Husky, approximately 2 years old. Very lively, castrated, which should slow him down a bit, but this dog will need a really lot of exercise and a lot of companionship. So.
That's all we have time for this time. I'm afraid if you've a story for us, please go to our Facebook pages or our Twitter pages. Details of contact are on the screen. Email news@estuary.tv or phone Grimsby 31 553. Until tomorrow, good evening.
Estuary TV's weather, sponsored by Hornsby's, celebrating 100 years in buses.
Hello and welcome to Estuary TV's weather. Mainly dry with some sunny spells on Friday, most prevalent through the morning, a little cloudier in the afternoon with some isolated showers possible, and a maximum temperature of 12 degrees Celsius. Remaining dry for most of Saturday with some sunny spells.
Estuary TV's weather, sponsored by Hornsby's, celebrating 100 years in buses.